What is it? The V60's conical shape allows for deeper layering of coffee grounds, and its spiral ridges, lack of flow restriction, allow the user to pour the water quickly for a delicate body or slowly for a heavier flavor. Anyway, am I listening to Matt Rose? People told me to skip this one last time. But I don't know, man. I'm gonna leave it on. I'll listen to it. One time. How's this volume?
Hello and welcome to MetaWatch Games.
It's Lewis.
All things matched play. In this episode, we're
things
taking a
matched
journey
play.
to the mortal realms to check out
Enhance.
Age of Sigmar. And who better to
Enhance.
do that with us than Matt from the studio? Matt, how you doing, mate?
Yeah, doing great. Good to be here
Pleasure to
again.
have you, man. So, the battle scroll, it's here.
Matt
It's
Rose.
finally here.
Yep.
We're going to talk about that in just a moment. But first, let's have a little check-in about some of the win rates for some of the factions and where we're at with those. So, how are we looking?
In general, the meta's looking pretty good. So we've had a pretty active couple months, obviously, with huge events like LVO that finished up. And,
True.
you know, of course, as always, we've been collecting that data, looking at it, and trying to see any trends. What we see is obviously a big jump. This was really the official kind of unveiling at a competitive scene for Cities of Sigmar as their new battle tome has come out. People have had time to build an army and start bringing it to events. So we've seen a significant jump in win rate for Cities of Sigmar. They're currently at 56% win rate overall, so just above our kind of target bracket for that 45 to 55%. So a little bit overperforming. There, obviously, we saw Cities of Sigmar versus City of Sigmar final at LVO, which was a very exciting game. But they're probably overperforming a little bit. Beyond that, we've seen some other factions doing quite well, although, you know, with a bit of a higher margin of error. So it's something that we're keeping our eye on. So, you know, things like Disciples of Tzeentch, there's a few players that have done really well with Disciples of Tzeentch at a competitive level. And, you know, Lumineth Realm Lords, particularly the kind of Senthoi build that's gained some popularity, has been doing well. But, you know, generally, there's quite a clump of factions in that kind of 50 to 55% win rate, and they tend to fluctuate quite a lot, event to event, depending on how people do. We were quite happy to see some of the factions that were previously overperforming have started to drop.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've seen Ossiarch Bone Reapers are now at a 54% win rate.
Caradron Overlords.
Caradron Overlords down at 52, Soulblight Gravelords down at 52. So, you know, Seraphon in the middle. So we've got a number of factions that are in a pretty healthy state. Ossiarch Bone Reapers are a good example where, you know, the external win rate is really not the whole story.
Right.
And that's one where, you know, we really dig under. You know, that's just a first indicator and really dig under. So, you know, when you look at Ossiarch Bone Reapers only in 3-game events, they're actually still the top faction. They're doing quite well. But then once you go to 5-game events, they drop quite a bit.
Yeah.
And so that kind of shows that, you know, where they really struggle is once they start going up against other people that are also 3-0.
Yeah.
And they start pairing in. Some people now know how to deal with them, have the tools to deal with them. They kind of drop off on that side.
It must be really nice to see as well some of those like slight changes that you make drop those factions down into that kind of Goldilocks zone.
Yeah. So it you know, overall, I think we've got 85% of the factions right now are in the target range. You know, there's still a few that are struggling that we've got our eye on. We've got you know, all of the Orc Warclans factions are still a little bit under. Big Wah's doing quite well. We've seen a big surge for Cruel Boys recently, and you know, we saw them do quite well at LVO and other events. There's a lot of kind of top players that have started looking at them or picking them up, running them at events, and so I think Cruel Boys have been gaining. They're currently at a 44% win rate, but I do expect that will go up as we see more events. Iron Jaws just under at 42, so, you know, still looking at some of those. And then we have a handful of other factions that are on the lower end. So you've got Sylvaneth tend to have quite a high skill ceiling
Mm-hmm.
to pilot them well. Night Haunt, Fire Slayers, and Stormcast are kind of the ones that we've kind of got our eye on.
So you guys have, you've got multiple tools at your disposal when kind of tackling a battle scroll. So, and you've been doing a bit of fine tuning and stuff with this new updated battle scroll as well. So chat to us a little bit about some of that fine tuning that you've been doing and some of the stuff you've introduced as well.
Yeah. So, when we look at this data, as I said, we have the really high level indicators like external win rate, but then mainly what we're digging into are the much more detailed analysis. So per war scroll win rates, per subfaction win rates. And, what we tend to look at, there's a couple of charts in particular that we really focus on. One is war scrolls that have particularly high win rates. So when there's some odd units, so, something like Claws of Karanak comes to mind, where, it's a really specific choice, but the Khorne lists that bring that unit in particular were significantly overperforming Khorne lists that didn't bring that unit. And so we can kind of look and try to spot where certain units might be too efficient or synergize too well with the army. Another chart that we look at a lot is really popular units that actually drag down the win rate. So units that people keep trying to bring, maybe it's a model that they love, a really cool unit, a cool gameplay ability, but a bit less efficient. And so they try to run it and, it's not working for them. And, that's where we try to give points breaks or buffs to those. And so, then that goes through our analysis, goes through feedback from our MetaWatch group and people that help, a lot of TOs that kind of help pull this together. And ultimately, that results in the battle scroll.
Yeah, nice. You've also been doing a little bit of sort of tweaking with some of the points values as well. So what kind of stuff have you done there?
Yeah. So I mean, points wise, it's really, as I said, looking through that per war scroll data and trying to figure out which things needed a tweak. So we've made a couple of adjustments on endless spells, but relatively minor fine tuning, kind of up or down 10 points on some spells that were either too popular or not. And then, looking at factions, Blades of Khorne are one that, they've been doing fairly well. Although the internal balance of the book is quite good, we're seeing quite a lot of the units being run. And so, small adjustment on Claws of Karanak there was an example of a unit that was overperforming. Cities of Sigmar, we've raised the points on some units, in particular Command Corps that was, very, very dominant in lists, often taken twice, which is really kind of not the intention for that unit. So upped some points there. But, we've also, when we raise points, we also often try to lower points to give other options for a build. So we've lowered the points. In particular, there's quite a big drop on Talia Vedra. It was a wonderful new centerpiece for that range. Some of the other units that didn't have quite as high inclusion. And, it's that approach that has kind of gone through a lot of the units. So, or a lot of the different armies. So, Daughters of Cain, you've got a handful of drops, including on Wrathy Cain. So it's, opening back up some builds that maybe people have moved away from. Fire Slayers have drops across a lot of their units. Gloomspite gets, a bit down, a bit up. So, again, like I said, that kind of approach throughout many of the units in the battle scroll. The last one to comment on with points is we've had fairly significant adjustments to two of the god characters, god tier characters. So Nagash sees a fairly considerable drop again, down to 860, and Archaon as well has a drop as well, going down to 820. So, really excited to see what that does for the inclusion of those kind of huge centerpiece models.
Nice. Now, you got the chance to go to LVO fairly recently, and that must have been a really great experience for you and a huge benefit as well to chat to some really high-skilled players and get a real sense of the game. So what I wanted to know was, what was your sort of hot take from LVO and how have you taken that into the battle scroll going forward?
Yeah, I mean, LVO was really great, and I had the opportunity to speak to a lot of the players there about the state of the game and their thoughts of the state of the game. And generally it was quite positive in terms of as we see in the data, the balance of the game is in a relatively healthy place. There are, I would say, there's always some things that just we haven't had the chance to fully gather data and adjust yet. So Cities of Sigmar overperforming a little bit. There's some factions that are struggling a little bit. As the meta evolves and as the game changes, it's fairly typical for something to be the best at the current moment and something to be struggling at the current moment. But in general, it was actually a really positive experience, wonderful event, and really positive conversations with players. So a lot of that feedback has been incorporated in terms of looking at particular units and making sure that we're trying to make adjustments on the right things.
Cool. So Matt, what kind of rules tweaks have you made to this battle scroll? Chat to us a little bit about those.
Sure. So the first kind of overarching change that we've looked at is boosting a little bit the kind of anti-magic options. So, with each GHB season, we have a theme of the season. Obviously, with Antor, that theme has been magic. We've got the primal magic and primal dice. But what we've seen in kind of the internal balance for the GHB is that generally, while there's really healthy inclusion of acolytes and of Antorian locuses and using primal dice, using all of the spells from the lore, there's less use or less inclusion on the anti-magic side. And a lot of the reason for that is because the tactics are quite challenging in this GHB. And, there's some tactics that are quite achievable, especially in early turns, like magical dominance, that you really need to have a wizard for. So we've tried to compensate for that a little bit by giving a boost to the anti-magic stuff. So there's two real changes there. One is a change to the Wizard Finders of Antor battalion, which effectively gives the units in that battalion a 5-up spell shrug. So it gives them that magical protection. As you can imagine, they'd have of a elite battalion of people that are trying to hunt down wizards. They've got that magical protection. And that goes in hand with a new tactic, which is for a hero with a nullstone adornment to be contesting an objective that was controlled by your opponent. So it's not a turn 1 tactic, typically, because the objective needs to have been controlled by your opponent unless you're going second. But obviously, you're only allowed to have a nullstone adornment if your army contains no wizards. And so this is, giving a tool for armies like potentially Fire Slayers or Sons of Behemoth, or a lot of armies that don't often have wizards, that are able to go and complete a new tactic. But maybe we're struggling with tactics this season. So that's kind of one of the biggest changes. And then we've made a lot of little tweaks, faction by faction. So just to walk through those, looking at Chaos, Khorne has been unpleased with the quantity of Khorne, of wizards being allied into Khorne armies.
Right.
This has made Khorne very sad. So we've made a very slight tweak to Khorne's Hatred of Sorcery rule, which is that each time a friendly unit casts a spell, you still have to roll a dice, as you would for an enemy wizard casting a spell, and on a 5-up, that spell is automatically unbound. So basically, once in a while, Khorne is like, hey, cut it out.
Yeah.
This is not my jam.
Yeah, sure.
I'm just none of that going on. So, it's still possible to ally in. Be'lakor still likes to pull strings and orchestrate plots. But, once in a while, Khorne is like, no, this
no way. It's not happening.
So, be interesting to see that change and what that does.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes hand in hand with then giving more options to lean into the anti-magic side, that it kind of more thematically fits with Khorne. On Maggotkin of Nurgle, we've changed probably the effect of probably the best named rule in Age of Sigmar, which is "My love is like a ripe fart" on the Sloppity Bile Piper.
It's a classic.
Classic ability name. And so that's being changed to a -1 to hit effect instead of the no pile-in. And what we saw was that there was some builds. It's a fairly significant change. Now, it's still a great unit. It still has the other two tunes that you can use. And -1 to hit is a fantastic effect. The anti-pile-in tech was creating some really, really techy, but also could be quite could be perceived as negative interactions where you could really prevent your opponent from fighting, especially when used in combination with a counter charge from the Glotkin. You could really shut everything down.
Right, yeah.
So that's something we kind of wanted to nip in the bud, and we were seeing that kind of start to propagate throughout a little bit. And then, for Beasts of Chaos, and this will be the start of a trend that applies to a number of armies, what we've looked at is we've looked at a lot of models that are on 32 mil bases or potentially 40 mil bases, but only have 1-inch attacks. So in the previous GHBs, you had the Galician Veterans rule that would allow you to fight in 2 ranks. And in this GHB, because that rule has gone away, a lot of those units have been struggling a little bit because their reach, effectively, if they rank up, the second rank can't reach, can't fight. So it's started to drop their inclusion. So we've made an adjustment to a number of units to increase their weapon range up to 2 inches to try to really make that a bit easier. Looking at Skaven, there's 2 little tweaks to Skaven. One is a tweak to actually the new tactic that we introduced to help Skaven out, which is Flee. We've made it a little bit easier. So now it's just 2 units, 2 Skaven units or more retreated this turn. So it used to be that it had to be a hero and a unit.
Right.
So just making that a little bit easier, make sure that it has the right impact. And then the other change, which is quite fun, is increasing the unit size of Plague Monks up to 20, allowing them to be run in bigger units and kind of opening up some of those Pestilence builds a little bit more. When you buy the unit, there's 20 in the box. And, Skaven are all about that kind of horde feeling. And so, it's really leaning into that. For Slaves to Darkness, a much requested tweak has been to up the Demon Prince's melee output. So we've literally just increased the attacks characteristic of some of the Demon Prince's weapons. Wonderful centerpiece kit.
Yeah.
Inclusion isn't what we wanted it to be. And so, hopefully that allows that unit to see a bit more use. Disciples of Tzeentch, same. We've got the 2-inch change on, for instance, the Zangors. And we've also dropped the points of both blue horrors and brimstone horrors. So, pink horrors is still a formidable unit because they split into blues and they split into brims, and it's a really, really tough unit to kill. But what this does is it opens up a couple new battle line options for Tzeentch to just start with blues or even start with brims, have some screens, have some cheaper units. So it's really significantly lowered the points there. Looking through some of the other factions, Seraphon in general has seen trying to improve the internal balance, some changes to improve the internal balance between Coalesced and Starborn a little bit. So Coalesced have still been struggling. Starborn have been performing quite well. So, while you look at the overall Seraphon win rate, it seems fine. It seems kind of in the middle. When you break that down, the story's a little bit more complicated where you have Starborn still sometimes overperforming and Coalesced under. So a couple changes to help either side of that that go alongside points changes. The first is a change to the Lord of Celestial Resonance command trait, which lets you generate additional cosmic power points. And effectively now, it only happens the first time that you successfully cast a spell, unbind a spell, or dispel a spell, instead of every time. Right. So instead of doubling your points, it's giving you a fixed increase. On the flip side, on the Coalesced side, Kroxigers and Kroxiger Warspawn are both going from 4 wounds to 5 wounds, which also makes a significant change in that now they'll count as 2 on objectives. And, hand in hand with some points changes for Coalesced, we really hope that that'll help improve that balance. Cities of Sigmar, we've talked about, have been overperforming a little bit. So, they have some points changes to correct for that. But the biggest balance change that we made to Cities of Sigmar is to change the Blazing Weapons spell on the Alchemite Warforger. And what we saw was that this spell tended to result in a bit of a binary state where if the spell went off, it was so devastating that the output of cities was increased so much. So the spell effectively adds mortal wounds in addition for your attacks for units around the Alchemite Warforger. And, that increased the power so much that if the spell went off, the game would swing wildly one way. And if the spell didn't go off, it could swing wildly the other way, or if it was unbound. So the change has been to tweak that spell to only affect melee attacks. There's lots of other shooting buffs in Cities of Sigmar available, but that one is really focusing in rather than kind of adding more mortal wound output to shooting. Beyond that, some more minor tweaks to other factions in terms of increasing to 2-inch range on attacks. So that affects Fire Slayers, that affects Night Haunt. Ossiarch Bone Reapers, we've made a pretty significant change to Null Myriad. So Null Myriad previously was a 2-up spell ignore, which is very powerful on units, but with quite a tight bubble around the hero that they have to stay close to get that protection. And what we found with that ability is it's a little bit too kind of hard external rock, paper, scissors. So often, depending on who the matchup is, especially in this season, if you go up against an army that a lot of their output is in offensive magic, there's such an early advantage to Null Myriad. But if you don't, then they don't really get any benefit from it. So what we've changed that to is just a flat 4-up spell ignore, but with no range to heroes. So it's just any unit. You can roll a dice, 4-up, ignore the spells. A bit more of a coin flip. So, still allows that magical play. It's still very powerful protection against it. But, an attempt to improve the internal balance of sub-factions in that book, but also have a little bit less of that kind of hard external counters in the meta. Soulblight Gravelords, we've made a tweak to one of their tactics, the Grasping Dead. So this is a tactic that previously was very, very easy to do. You basically needed to pick a summonable unit and not have it die, have it stay around. And because often you have huge hordes of skeletons or zombies that can come back or can replace models, it was quite an easy tactic to do. Now it's similar, but the tweak that we've made is that unit has to have slain models this turn. So against certain targets, that's not a problem, but it means that against some other targets, if you get your unit of zombies in combat with the wrong thing, for instance, a Man Crusher mob or something, they may not be able to drop one of those models. Destruction, we've got a tweak. Effectively, the 2 new tactics that we introduced for Cruel Boys and Ironjaws now require that the model picked to be your general has to have the appropriate keyword. So it's a little bit of an adjustment for Big Wah. It doesn't affect Cruel Boys or Ironjaws at all, but for Big Wah, they could effectively use both. Now they can only use one or the other of those tactics. And yeah, that's pretty much an overview of the rules changes. More details in the battle scroll, but I'm sure everyone's going to kind of pour through that.
Yeah, you guys have definitely been busy.
Yeah, lots of little tweaks throughout. But, really thanks to everyone in the MetaWatch group and all of the players that I've talked to, all of the advice. We always read all of the emails sent in to aosfaq@gwplc.com. Please, send us your feedback.
Yeah.
We love to read it. And a lot of the adjustments are based on that feedback coming in.
And finally, so what has the studio got their eye on next? What are you looking for next?
So, ultimately, anytime we do a battle scroll, the main thing that we're interested in is then collecting data to measure and assess what the impact of that battle scroll was.
Yeah.
Are there any factions that we didn't make enough of an adjustment on or over-adjusted? And ultimately, always with the aim of kind of getting all of the factions in the game into that kind of target bracket, that sweet spot in terms of external balance, but also always keeping an eye on internal balance and making sure that each faction offers kind of a wealth of options in terms of different configurations, different units you can run for that army.
Bro. Well, thank you so much, Matt, for popping in. It's always great to chat to you about the meta and all the different factions and some of the updates that you guys have got coming up, some of the stuff that you look at. And thank you guys for joining us too. We'll catch you next time on Meta Watch.